The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Welcome to Rudy's Revelation, finding revelation in the news and meaning in media. It's Sunday, December 13th, 2020. Today I'll be talking back to the Sunday Talking Heads on CBS Face the Nation for a montage where CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer reports on the global vaccine deployment, and Trump and Biden supporters talk about declining to take the coronavirus vaccine. Biden and current Louisiana Congressman Cedric Richmond claims GOP lawmakers and the American electorate acknowledge a Trump loss. I'll be tearing into the Sunday New York Times, showing how the newspaper continually mischaracterizes the facts to mislead the public. And of course, I'll be going over the weekend headlines all in the next 30 minutes. First, I'll be taking you back to school, giving you some historical context to frame this week's news narratives. The word of the day is altruism.
Behavior by an animal that is not beneficial to or may be harmful to itself, but that benefits others of its species.
And the reason I talk about altruism, it seems today that people are altruistic, and some refer to altruism as unselfish regard for or a devotion to the welfare of others, and that's the way they look at it. But really it is the behavior of an animal that is not beneficial to or maybe harmful to itself, but that benefits others of its species. And the problem is with most people, they're very compassionate and they want to go on and help people, but they don't realize sometimes in their altruistic effort that they don't end up benefiting themselves, and a lot of times they end up hurting the species. Now, this is an article from Yale, The Problem with Altruism. According to evolutionary theory, altruism shouldn't exist. Natural selection favors adaptations that increase fitness and individuals' ability to survive and reproduce. Altruism does the opposite. Selfless actors aren't rewarded with extra offspring. Instead, altruism often comes with a penalty. A prairie dog whistles to warn others of a hawk attack, so the hawk swoops straight down to eat the whistler. Worker ants spend their lives feeding a queen, missing the chance to pass on their individual genes. The best way to reproduce is to be selfish. So why haven't the genes for altruism died out? Now, I'm also going to get into effective altruism, which is a philosophy and social movement that advocates using evidence and reasoning to determine the most effective way to benefit others. Altruism refers to improving the lives of others as opposed to egoism, which emphasizes only self-interest. Effectiveness refers to doing the most good with whatever resources are available, as opposed to doing only some amount of good, as well as determining what is the most good by using evidence and reasoning, as opposed to only doing what feels good or appears intuitively appealing. Virtue signaling. Now, one of the main proponents of effective altruism is Professor Pete Singer. Now, Peter Singer was well known to advance the philosophy of effective altruism. And like many philosophers of the left, he was well regarded. But in some circles, he isn't. Peter Singer event was canceled in New Zealand in February because of his public stance on the morality of killing some disabled newborns, which is eugenics. Peter Singer, best known as a proponent for the effective altruism movement, has previously written that parents should be allowed to euthanize disabled babies if they wish to. In his 1979 book, Practical Ethics, Singer included conditions like Down syndrome, spina bifida, and hemophilia among disabilities that make a child's life prospects dim. And one of the reasons I get into this is because of learned helplessness. What is learned helplessness? This is from Psychology Today. Learned helplessness occurs when an individual continually faces a negative, uncontrollable situation and stops trying to change their circumstances even when they have ability to do so. And this happens when altruistic types try to do good, and when they see their good isn't doing well, they tend to give up. And they give up their individual power, usually to the state. I also want to bring up Stockholm Syndrome. Now, Stockholm Syndrome is a psychological response that occurs when a hostage or abuse victim bond with their captors or abusers. This psychological connection develops over a course of days, weeks, months, or even years of captivity or abuse. With this syndrome, the hostages or abuse victims may come to sympathize with their captives. This is the opposite of fear, terror, and disdain that might be expected from victims in these situations. And to get right onto the news and the headlines, this is from NPR. State representative stripped of committee assignments after posting Facebook Live video. State Representative Cynthia Johnson of Detroit has been punished by House Republican leaders for Facebook video. They say she appears to threaten supporters of Donald Trump. And if you saw the video, that you knew what she was trying to do. Now, she had faced threats for her position on the fraudulent vote in Michigan, particularly in her district. From Fox Business, YouTube to remove content that alleges widespread voter fraud in the 2020 election. Videos claiming any other candidate besides President-elect Joe Biden won the 2020 election will be taken down. YouTube will remove videos and content that allege widespread voter fraud. Now, this is one of the stories I want to get into. Video of Harrison Deal fiery crash scene sparks conspiracy theories. Harrison Deal, a University of Georgia student, had been identified as a victim in a Friday multi-vehicle crash in Chatham County. Video has since emerged of the fiery crash scene. And this is where it gets interesting. Who was working as a field staffer on the Kelly Loeffler U.S. Senate campaign was killed in a fiery 3-vehicle crash near Pooler Friday. 3 other people sustained minor injuries. Deal was pronounced dead at the scene. Deal was also the boyfriend of the daughter of Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. Now, I'm not going to get into this article on the conspiracy theories because I want to go over quickly a couple other things. You see, his fiery crash, his car blew up, and the engine was reportedly thrown 1,000 feet from the crash. Now, where have we heard stuff like this before? Journalist Michael Hastings sent chilling email to colleagues before his death. Now, people don't know who Michael Hastings was. He was a Rolling Stone reporter. But the thing about Hastings' car crash, and I'm going to read from this article here from Fox News, mere hours before the fiery crash, again another fiery crash, that took his life, journalist Michael Hastings sent out email to friends and colleagues urging them to get legal counsel if they were approached by the federal authorities. Now, this was in 2013 during the Obama administration, and he had recently wrote the expose about General McChrystal in Afghanistan, and he was working on another article that was going to expose the CIA. He complained to friends and family that he had been followed by federal agents and was fearing for his life. And then he died in this fiery crash, again, where the engine of the vehicle was ejected nearly 1,000 feet. Now, if people don't know this, is that they do safety tests on cars. So if they get into an accident, cars don't blow up. And so this is the second instance where a car blew up. And the person who died, the other people received minor injuries, but the person who died happened to be the boyfriend of the daughter of the governor of a contested state, Georgia, and was also a staffer for a Republican senatorial candidate that is running in a Senate runoff race in January that could decide the balance of power in the United States Congress and in the Senate. So if the Republicans lose, if the two Republicans in the Senate runoff in Georgia lose, the Democrats will take over the entire government. So you'll see why this kid's murder, or, I'm speculating here, his death might scare people. This is from news.com in Australia. Did the CIA assassinate journalist Michael Hastings? Well, the reason they bring up this article is WikiLeaks Vault 7 dump reignites conspiracy theories surrounding death of Michael Hastings. As I mentioned before, he was the Rolling Stones reporter. Not only can the CIA hack your iPhone, Android, or smart TV, they can also carry out nearly undetectable assassinations. And in Vault 7, that was released back when this article was released, in March of 2017, as of 2014, the CIA was also looking at infecting the vehicle control systems used by modern cars and trucks. The purpose of such a control is not specified, but it would permit the CIA to engage in nearly undetectable assassinations. That is straight from WikiLeaks. But nobody pays attention to that, and everybody are goldfish, so they don't remember. So I also want to touch on, this is from September of this year from the American Thinker. This is an article by Jack Cashel. On the face of things, the July 2016 murder of Seth Rich has intrigued enough for a full season of House of Cards. Unknown assailants gunned down the young DNC data analyst at 4 a.m. on Washington, D.C. street and took nothing. 2 weeks later, international man of mystery Julian Assange strongly suggests on Dutch TV that Rich was his source for the purloined DNC emails, then rolling the Democratic Party and offering a $20,000 reward to find the killer. 3 days before the November election, Assange reportedly tells liberal media that Rich was indeed his source. Days after Trump's inauguration, legendary investigative journalist Cy Hirsch cites an FBI report confirming Assange's claim. Later that year, DNC honcho Donna Brazile dedicates her book, Hacks, to Rich and wonders out loud whether the Russians had played some part in his unsolved murder. Basically, they blamed the DNC email leaks of John Podesta's emails on the Russians, on Russian hackers. And everybody knows at this point, and if you looked at the actual data, that it was indeed Seth Rich, because the files were loaded onto a hard drive and not hacked over the internet. And that was proven by William Benny. Seth Richards and 4 others killed within 6 weeks of each other. Clinton body count adds 5 in 6 weeks. Victor Thorne, Sean Lucas, who was the prominent lawyer who delivered a subpoena to Debbie Wasserman Schultz in a class action lawsuit on the primaries being rigged against Sanders. Joe Montana and John Ash. And this was back in 2016, and this is an article from 2017. So we're going to move quickly along. Why did Congress going back to the headlines, why did Congress strip the Chinese drone ban from the NDAA? Pasadena man charged for allegedly buying Maserati with COVID relief money. Twitter briefly limits users interacting with Trump tweets about stolen election. This is from The Hill. From CNS News, federal spending sets record through November, deficit second highest ever. For all you conservatives out there. Workers riot at Indian iPhone factory over exploitation claims. This is from Revolver. A lot of people probably have seen this. Chinese professor reveals plot in shock video. U.S. elites in China have teamed up to take control of America. A remarkable speech by a Chinese professor, Di Dongsheng, delivered at a November 28th conference in Shanghai, reveals that in China, elites can talk openly about how they have brought foreigners under their sway. This is from The Guardian. Details revealed of secret deal that gave Chinese spies free rein in Switzerland. Agents traveled from China at Swiss taxpayers' expense to interview deportation targets. A full text of secret deal between Switzerland and China that allowed Chinese security officials to access to the country at Swiss taxpayers' expense has been revealed for the first time as the government pushes its law to renew it. A 5-year readmission agreement, which was signed in 2015 and expired on Monday, lays out terms for Chinese agents to travel to Switzerland and interview suspected Chinese nationals that Swiss authorities wish to deport. This is from Zero Hedge. Hunter Biden subpoenaed over Burisma 24 other entities as part of 4 investigations. Attorney General William Barr reportedly hid 2 federal probes into Hunter Biden for months. This is from the New York Post. Also from the New York Post, repair shop owner at center of Hunter Biden saga defends himself. The Delaware computer shop owner at the heart of the Hunter Biden laptop saga has released a video defending himself against the allegation that he's a Russian hacker or spy. This is an article from the Post from December 11th. I'm going to go ahead and tear into the Sunday New York Times. 4 stabbed and 1 shot as Trump supporters and opponents clash. Supporters of the president in several cities say they were still convinced that the election was stolen no matter what the courts say. Some confrontations with counter-protesters turned violent. And if anybody knows what happened here, again, at night, the Antifa counter-protesters went out looking for Trump supporters. Apparently they didn't find any like they did last time. Last time they came down on old people and people using a restaurant and stuff. So again, they came to the restaurant that was frequented by the Proud Boys, and the Proud Boys retaliated. But the stabbings occurred, most of the stabbings were done by 1 Antifa member. Scandal dogs AstraZeneca's vaccine partner in China. The British-Swedish drug maker has joined with a huge Asian company to produce a COVID-19 vaccine in China, where shady reputations are common in the pharmaceutical industry. So basically there's corruption in China, and they're kind of going along with it. But the New York Times says, well, it's China, that's just the way they work in China. China, in nudge to U.S., makes a new promise to tackle global warming. Speaking at an online summit of the 5th anniversary of the Paris Climate Agreement, Xi Jinping said that China would reduce its carbon intensity by over 65% by 2030. This is an article by Samana Sengupta. China on Saturday promised incremental new steps to address climate change in the next decade. You know, the problem is here is this is Chinese propaganda. They're trying, mind you, they're trying to put a good face on China, because the biggest argument in China, especially with global warming, is America's doing all these things, even outside the Paris Agreement, but China and India are doing nothing. And so this is a PR piece for China saying they will do things. Who knows if this is true or not?
反正政府留下来的污泥作水，只好电视的厂商建设起一个崭新的、强盛的、民主的、实的中华人民民主共和国。
2020 was especially deadly, and people always blaming the virus, but COVID wasn't the only culprit. So overall deaths are up. And if you look, if you could see the chart here, you could see that the rise in deaths are not due to COVID, because the amount of COVID deaths are pretty steady. The year 2020 has been abnormal for mortalities. At least 356,000 more people in the United States have died than usual since the coronavirus pandemic took hold in the country in the spring. But not all of these deaths have been directly linked to COVID-19. So what is happening? More than a quarter of the deaths are above normal and have been other causes, including diabetes, Alzheimer's, high blood pressure, and pneumonia, according to New York Times analysis or estimates. You see, all this, the whole coronavirus pandemic, has brought stress upon the nation and really the world. And so stress is a big killer. And so it's going to exacerbate any conditions you might have. Why these young men carry guns? Police struggling to stem a rise and a wave of shootings in New York City and are confronting a deep-seated subculture that glorifies guns. Now, I'm not going to go into this story because it's about young black men who carry illegal guns to protect themselves. And that's why we have a Second Amendment, is to protect yourself. So, and if you live in a crime-ridden area, you want to protect yourself. So the best way to do that, especially protect yourself from people with guns, is to get a gun. So we end every week in the Sunday Review, and we're going to go into one article here, and this is how it's listed in the newspaper, as populists like Trump need the technocrats, they claim. And when I went online to bring out this article, they had changed the headline from "Trump needed the boneheads more than he knew." Populists can cast themselves in opposition to technocratic expertise, but they ultimately rely upon it. Now, this is an article by Julius Crean, who is the editor of American Affairs, and he goes into this long-winded trying to convince people that populists need technocrats when the populists are actually fighting against the elite. So people don't know the opposite of elitism is populism. And what we're fighting against, those who support the populist movement in America, is that we're fighting against the elite technocrats, who are a few that are using technology to rule over the many. And he goes on to try to justify that Trump, he needs scientists and he needs experts. And we all kind of need experts, but it's where you get the experts from. You don't want them from the deep state. In theory, populists should favor democratic processes that allow from a wide-ranging citizen input in policy formation. Technocrats, by contrast, rely on a narrow group of experts to shape policy. But events of recent years have challenged these assumptions. The executive bureaucracy has proved a more reliable instrument for translating populist causes into policy than nominally democratic institutions like Congress. Says who? So we're going to leave it there. And we're going to go over to Face the Nation and Elizabeth Palmer. This is basically a coronavirus wrap-up. It's a scare trick. And then you have Cedric Richmond, the Louisiana congressman, who's going to be joining the Biden administration if Biden is seated. And let's hear what they have to say. about the coronavirus. And also, Cedric Richmond also talks about the election. So let's listen in.
You trust the government and trust this process and would go ahead with the vaccine.
A program that began here in the UK on Monday in 50 hospitals, apart from a couple of temporary allergic reactions, has gone without a hitch.
In Asia, another vaccine is making its widespread debut. China's Sinovac version. Here's the first load of 1 million doses arriving in Indonesia.
There have been some failures as well on the vaccine development front. A couple of promising trials, one Australian and one Anglo-French, were stopped this week because the vaccines had yielded disappointing results.
Now that the FDA is endorsing the vaccine, does that make you more willing now to take it?
No. It's too rushed. It's too rushed, and there's just too many question marks still for me.
You were reluctant before to take the vaccine. Given where we are now, have you changed your mind?
I haven't changed my mind. My biggest concern is how, money has entered the equation. When you have money, pharmaceutical companies and politics.
You trust the government and trust this process.
This is a scary scenario for me.
And JR, you were also hesitant. You didn't necessarily trust that the government would be giving you something that is safe. Do you still feel that way?
Oh, of course, I still feel that way. I don't know what's in the drug.
You trust the government and trust this process.
In December, I was very sick. My wife was very sick, and my oldest son was very sick. Since we have spoken, I went back to talk to my doctor in late October. He said, I believe you had the coronavirus. We just didn't know what it was. So let's take a test. Took the test, have antibodies for it.
No, I'm actually going to continue to rely on my own immune system. I firmly believe in taking control of your own health.
You trust the government and trust this process and would go ahead with the vaccine.
Who said I trusted the government? I'm from the government. I'm here to help. I run into the night screaming. If you're going to trust anything, trust the fact that the pharmaceutical companies want to make money.
I wouldn't go stand in line and sign up for it, just to volunteer for it. Absolutely not.
And look, the one thing about President-elect Biden is that he is honest and he's transparent.
You trust the government.
And so what we don't want to do is mislead the American public, overpromise and underdeliver. So,
should teachers be mandated to take those shots? Okay.
But what we're going to do is appeal to the American people to rise up to their civic duty, and let's all get on the same page.
You trust the government.
So that's still to be determined, but we'll see what happens.
2/3 of the Republican conference, including your friend, Congressman Steve Scalise, have supported this failed effort by Texas to get the Supreme Court to try to overturn the results. And he says he still supports the president's attempts to do so. If 2/3 of the Republican conference doesn't recognize Joe Biden's victory as the president-elect, how can you do business with them?
They recognize Joe Biden's victory. All of America recognizes Joe Biden's victory. If Republicans won't meet us halfway, we will go to the American people and we will continue to push our agenda.
The president-elect's son, Hunter Biden, revealed this week that he is the target of a tax-related, as he describes it, investigation by the U.S. Attorney in Delaware. Unless President Trump's Justice Department clears Hunter Biden of wrongdoing before leaving office, it's going to be presented as a question for the Biden administrations. Should a special counsel be appointed to remove any questions about propriety here?
Hunter Biden issued his own statement, and I think the statement speaks for itself.
There was violence again in Washington, D.C. with these pro-Trump protests. Antifa was also present. Are you concerned about this kind of violence around the inauguration?
Peaceful protests are one thing, but breaking the laws is another thing altogether.
You trust the government.
All right, that's it for us tonight. See you next week. Sunday, Rudy's Revelation, Facebook and Twitter.